we'll be making a start. Much quicker than usual as well. Where is Andy? So we're moving into the afternoon session, hopefully revitalised after some lunch, and we're keen to welcome our second keynote speaker of the day. So we are welcoming Kat Salvidge, Strategic Technical Manager for Textiles at WRAP. So Kat joined WRAP in 2020, playing a key role in the launch of Textiles 2030, WRAP's groundbreaking initiative to accelerate the UK's fashion and textile industry towards a circular economy and net zero. Kat is a specialist in sustainable and circular textiles and leads the technical strategy for Textile 2030, bringing together businesses from across the sector and academia and knowledge partners to catalyse change. In her role at WRAP, Kat has led the co-development of key industry publications and guidance, including the Textiles 2030 Circularity Roadmap and Textiles 2030 Circular Design Kit. So welcome, Kat.
Yep, thanks everybody, and nice to meet you all. And yeah, thanks to Alana and the Impact Network for inviting me to speak today on the approach Textiles 2030 is taking to create systemic change and how we're using measurement tools and data to drive this. And just thanks Alana for the nice introduction. And just prior to WRAP, yeah, I was a designer working for many years with many of the high street UK retailers. So I guess in that 12 years that I was a designer, I really saw the industry changing firsthand, and particularly kind of the speed and the fast turnaround of the new products that we were trying to get onto the market. And then I guess the challenges that brands were facing when then trying to implement sustainability strategies in line with that on such a competitive market. And I guess that's kind of what then led me to WRAP and my journey with WRAP so far. So just really quickly for anybody who doesn't know about WRAP, we are a climate action NGO, and our vision is a thriving world in which climate change is no longer a problem. Our mission is to make the world a more sustainable place, and we do this by bringing, I was going to say, yeah, can everybody hear me?
I think it is on.
Do I need to stand here?
Yeah. Yeah, it's on.
Hello. Well, yeah, just shout if you can't hear me, and I'll try and speak louder. Yeah, so our mission is to make the world a more sustainable place, and we do that by bringing businesses, governments, and people together to overcome shared challenges. And we're also known for our research, evidence, and insights that really allows us to act on the facts to drive the change we want to see. And our key focus area in tackling climate change is on how we can change the way products are produced, consumed, and disposed of. So, one of our key focus areas at WRAP is textiles, and that's where Textiles 2030 comes in. So Textiles 2030 is a voluntary agreement for the UK fashion and textile industry. Our aim is to support the industry to make rapid science-based progress on circularity and climate action, and really create system-level change. So we launched the agreement in April 2021 after extensive consultation with industry, and it really builds on the success of WRAP's previous voluntary agreement, the Sustainable Clothing Action Plan, or SCAP 2020, as some of you may have heard of that initiative, and that ran from 2012 to 2020. So I guess it's kind of how is Textiles 2030 creating system level change? So we are convening industry champions and change leaders from across the textile value chain. We have created clear calls to action by setting industry targets and setting out a roadmap on how we aim to meet those targets. And we can also show clarity of the direction of travel by using our Textiles 2030 footprint tool as a common reporting mechanism to really track progress and identify impact hotspots where collective action is needed. And I'll go into a bit more detail on all of those 3 points as I go through the presentation. So first of all, I guess, who is involved in Textiles 2030 and how are we kind of convening those kind of industry champions? So Textiles 2030 convenes a critical mass of brands and retailers in the UK, along with the reuse and recycling organisations, industry leading knowledge partners, and also government to ensure we are addressing challenges and developing solutions that enable systemic change. And Textiles 2030 is a public-private partnership initiative, which means all the work that we're doing goes towards informing kind of crucial policy developments to drive the sustainability and circularity of the fashion and textile sector. So currently, we have 130 organisations signed up to Textiles 2030. So 33 brands and retailers representing over 62% of all the clothing products placed on the market in the UK. So that spans fashion, workwear and professional clothing, and also home textiles. So really getting that critical kind of mass of businesses behind the initiative. We also have 48 textile reuse and recycling organisations, and that kind of includes commercial textile collectors and sorters, the charity sector, circular business model providers, fibre-to-fibre recyclers, and also textile manufacturers. And then we have 49 affiliates. So there are innovators, researchers, academia, standards bodies, trade associations, and other multi-stakeholder initiatives. So moving on to how Textiles 2030 is using data, targets and measurement to really drive collective industry progress. So we take a target, measure, act approach. So we have set targets to give our signatories and the wider industry kind of clear strategic direction. We then measure the scope 3 impacts of our signatories' product portfolios using our Textiles 2030 footprint tool. And then this really highlights to us areas of concern and allows us to support the industry with focused action in high impact areas. So looking at what the targets are for Textiles 2030, so we've got 2 headline targets. So based on a 2019 baseline, our signatories have signed up to collectively contributing to and achieving a 50% absolute reduction in carbon emissions and a 30% reduction in water footprint of textile products placed on the market by 2030. And then Textiles 2030 also has a third ambition, which was to develop and deliver a roadmap for circular textiles. And we launched this in April 2021 at the launch of Textiles 2030. So we kind of sought really extensive industry input from businesses, other fashion and textile sector organisations and technical specialists to agree on those ambitious targets, particularly assuring that they align and are coordinated with international efforts, particularly the Paris Climate Change Agreement and kind of the net zero agenda. So then moving on to how we measure progress towards those targets. So progress against the Textile 2030 targets are measured using WRAP's Textile 2030 footprint calculator. So this tool was developed collaboratively with kind of over a dozen leading UK textile businesses over the past 10-year period. So we started the development of this tool during the SCAP 2020 agreement. And the tool really measures the scope 3 emissions for the whole product life cycle of products placed on the market in the UK. So that includes the materials, the manufacture, retail, consumer use, and the disposal phase. And it really also allows signatories to align on a common reporting mechanism so we can benchmark progress of individual businesses against industry-wide progress. So businesses that are signed up to Textiles 2030 use the tool to report to WRAP on an annual basis, to track their progress and track kind of circularity actions that they're taking. They can model future scenarios using the footprint tool, and they can also generate reports to communicate action areas to decision makers and also investors. And then in terms of how RAP uses the data, so we use the annual data submitted to provide brands and retailers with individual data reports and recommendations that will kind of maximise their impact and their footprint reductions. And this data is also used by RAP to publicly communicate signatories' aggregated carbon and water footprints, as well as the total volume of products businesses are placing on the market in the UK annually. So this slide is quite busy, but this slide I just wanted to include to kind of illustrate, I guess, where the Textiles 2030 footprint tool sits within kind of the reporting landscape and how it can interact with other reporting tools. And by no means, not all the reporting tools are on this slide. But as I mentioned before, the footprint tool's kind of original and main purpose is to really provide that common reporting mechanism for us to track progress against those Textiles 2030 targets. But it also really lets signatories understand and track their scope 3 carbon and water footprint of their product portfolios across the full life cycle, so including use, reuse and recycling. So I guess kind of some things that are quite unique about the tool is that it serves both brand and retailers and the reuse and recycling sector. So this allows Textiles 2030 to understand the impact of the whole value chain rather than just focusing on production and raw material impacts. And it's also set up to measure the impacts of circularity. So looking at including improvement actions that businesses take around circular business models and end-of-life pathways, as well as kind of those changes to the design of the product. And I guess another way it differs from some of these tools that are also out there is that it's rather than it being product specific or supplier specific impacts, it looks at kind of a retailer's full product portfolio footprint. So we're aware that when we work with many of our businesses, they are also using other tools to report. Some of these tools provide maybe more tailored reporting options, but we are kind of always keen to keep developing the footprint tool, collaborating and aligning with those other reporting tools where possible to create that consistency that's needed. And I guess currently another thing to note with the footprint tool is that it works currently mainly on global averages. So we're kind of keen as we further develop Textiles 2030 and the Textiles 2030 programme to allow the tool to take a more tailored approach to reporting for businesses that have that robust data and verification to be able to kind of include it in their reporting. So again, we're really keen to collaborate with other reporting tools and initiatives that have those mechanisms to kind of provide that more granular data. So for example, some of the HIG and SAC measurement tools, and then other initiatives like Textile Exchange and ZTHC. So then I guess moving on to how we've used the data and the kind of measurement tools to really drive collaborative action. So by using the data within the footprint tool, we went through a process of creating a series of scenarios and doing quite a lot of scenario modelling, as well as consulting with the industry to really define what the focus areas should be for collective action within Textiles 2030. And I guess from this work, making significant progress on circularity was really identified and as an area where the industry really needed to collaborate to make kind of meaningful progress and accelerate action. So to support this, Textiles 2030 developed our 10-year circularity roadmap, setting out key actions and outcomes required for the industry to move towards a circular economy and meet those Textiles 2030 targets. So the roadmap breaks circularity down into 3 key work streams to make circularity and achieving the targets more manageable for businesses. So each area focuses on a different aspect of circularity. So we have designing for circularity, circular business models, and closing the loop on materials at the end of their usable life. So when we look at our design for circularity workstream, we really want to bring businesses together to look at how the industry can design for longevity and for recyclability, and and how we can kind of bring all of our stakeholders together to develop consistent good practice design principles that we can then kind of measure and track progress on. And we'll also be looking at how businesses can kind of design out waste from the production process. Then looking at circular business models, the aim for this work stream is to really increase the adoption of circular business models that use products for longer and extend kind of the usable life of products that already exist. So the real aim here is to kind of decouple economic growth from the use of those virgin resources. And then finally, our closing the loop on materials work stream aims to explore how we reuse materials after their useful life and how we can really accelerate the commercialisation of fibre-to-fibre recycling through kind of more collective and collaborative action. So now just moving on to, I guess, what we found out from the data, the kind of annual data reporting through Textiles 2030 and the progress that the initiative is making. So in November 2023, we released our second annual progress report using the data that had been reported to us by signatories through the footprint tool. So I guess the progress is really a story of two halves. So we have seen kind of impressive progress on impact reductions on a per tonne basis since 2019. So we've seen a 12% reduction in carbon and a 4% reduction in the water footprint. However, this progress is really being cancelled out by increasing production volumes. So we've seen production volumes increase by 13% since 2019, which means that we actually only saw a 2% overall decrease in carbon, and we actually saw an increase in the water footprint of 8%. So although we expected to see kind of footprints going down marginally or even kind of going upwards in the first few years of the agreement, because some of the actions we're kind of asking the industry to take are going to take longer than the initial 2 years to really embed them in businesses at scale. I think what these results really show us is that we won't be able to hit the Textiles 2030 targets with improvements to material sourcing and lower impact production alone. And it really highlights the importance of circularity to address increasing production volumes and increased use of virgin resources. And it also really highlights that being able to report on a product's full life cycle to really understand the impact of the industry as a whole is going to be really important as we move forward. Just before I move on from this slide, there were a few other kind of positive findings to highlight and things that we'll track over time as well. So we found out that there was 8% more textiles were collected by reuse and recycling organisations than in 2019, and also that pre-love sales equated to 9% of all the products sold by Textiles 2030 signatories. And I guess this is kind of a key stat that we want to track over the agreement and see increasing over the course of the 10 years. So then kind of looking at how we use the insights from the data reporting to prioritise key focus areas going forward. So based on the results, we have 4 key calls to action for the industry. So we really need to accelerate the development, piloting and scaling of circular business models such as resale, rental and repair to decouple business growth from the use of virgin resources. So I think to build more circular business model kind of actions, reportable actions within the footprint tool, we really need to see businesses piloting so we can get some of that kind of primary data that we've been talking about in the earlier sessions, so we can really understand kind of the impact that those models can have. Our second kind of focus area is around improving textile product durability to expand the usable life of clothing and enable circular business models to scale as well. So our insights have highlighted that designing for longer life and increasing reuse could help to achieve substantial carbon savings of around 15%. And RAP is currently working on a project with Leeds LITAC at the University of Leeds on how we can develop consistent minimum testing protocols and guidelines for by product category, and I guess then how we can track progress on increasing durability over the course of the Textiles 2030 agreement. Our next area is around fibre-to-fibre recycling, so we really want to enable the scaling of fibre-to-fibre recycling, and there's a real call to action now for brands and retailers to really establish kind of meaningful partnerships and offtake agreements with recyclers to attract the investment that's needed into that sector. And then we also want brands to design with recyclability in mind to help meet those kind of future recycled fibre demands. And then finally, we really need to give the industry's water footprint the same focus as carbon and GHG emissions have had to date. So from this year's reporting, we saw that 84% of the total water footprint came from cotton production. So we really want the industry to collectively identify and kind of stimulate the market for less water-intensive alternatives to conventional cotton. So that could be organic cotton, regenerative, recycled cottons, but also looking at kind of recycled man-made cellulosics as well. But obviously, whilst doing that, ensuring that there is a just transition for cotton farmers. So finally, coming on to kind of, I guess, Textiles 2030's priorities relating to reporting and the footprint tool specifically, and I guess where we need to see industry collaboration to support consistent and comparable measurement of the industry's kind of impacts and to measure that progress. So the first area, which I think has come up quite a lot this morning, is around verification and traceability. So we're looking at this from both the brand and retailer and the reuse and recycling sectors reporting. So from brand and retailer perspective, we know that kind of the processing phase has the highest carbon footprint by life cycle stage at around 55%. However, kind of the percentage and the tonnage of reported improved wet processing actions within our Textiles 2030 kind of footprint tool has actually reduced since 2019. And this isn't because brands and retailers aren't kind of working on lower impact, implementing these low impact processes. It's just due to really the fact that they don't have verifiable data, or they have a lack of data to be able to report it into the Textiles 2030 tool. And I think that's just really showing that real lack of traceability within the supply chains. And I think as we want to continue to work towards adding kind of new improvement actions into our footprint tool that relate to improved production processes and kind of circular design where there might not currently be a certification, or perhaps this action sits below kind of tier 1, it's really vital that we collectively address the difficulties in verification and traceability of supply chains if we really want to accurately track the industry's impacts. And I think policy is going to be also a real driver in this area, with particularly in the EU, the requirement for kind of digital product passports for products, meaning that supply chain visibility is going to become essential very soon. And then when we're looking from our reuse and recycling organisations perspective, we really want to continue to work with the sector to increase the number of organisations that are reporting into the Textiles 2030 footprint tool, and continue to improve the quality and the accuracy of the data that is being submitted to us, to enable us to build a clearer and more transparent picture of that sector and supply chain in particular, but also to support those businesses that are out there about the opportunities for them, and particularly around recycling end markets and kind of new end markets that could help drive a bigger impact. So then the second point was around, we really want to look at how we can use the footprint tool to drive action on tackling increasing tonnages and to really get a clearer picture of production volumes and not just sales volumes. So we can really establish a better picture of, I guess, that pre-consumer waste that is being created by the industry. So looking at kind of overproduction, unsold stock, surplus, returns and faulty items. Because again, it's an area where there are a lot of statistics out there, but do we really understand kind of the scale of the problem and also kind of the pathways to reduce the impact. Then thirdly, our focus is on developing measurement for more circular activities. So we are doing some work to develop a common displacement rate methodology for circular business model reporting to really help us, I guess, analyse the impacts of certain circular business models based on how they're being delivered, who their customers are. So that's kind of a key focus for us. We'll also be looking at working to include more recycled fibres in the footprint tool, and also how we can begin to measure the impact of some of the circular design principles that are included within the Textiles 2030 Circular Design Toolkit. And I think kind of in this area in particular, that real life primary data from pilots is going to be key to developing measurements and metrics for many of these actions. So this is an area where we're really keen to kind of collaborate with the industry to kind of get that data and be able to continue to build the tool. So then finally, we'll also be looking at how we can now use kind of the data that's within the footprint tool and what we've learned from the current data reporting to date to create some more focused circularity targets to really drive action around those 3 key work streams within our roadmap. And then this is my final slide. So this final slide just kind of gives a bit of a more visual illustration of the timelines for some of those reporting priorities in relation to the Textiles 2030 roadmap. So we've got a real initial focus over the next kind of 2 years on kind of that traceability and verification, but also developing the reporting for those circularity actions to help us develop those targets. And just kind of really ensure that the footprint tool can continue to be developed as a robust reporting mechanism that can be used as a tool to really drive industry action around the targets. So yes, that is all from me, but yeah, we're really excited to be involved in kind of the Impact Plus network and how kind of all the work that we're going to be doing around kind of baselines and environmental metrics can kind of feed into the work of Textiles 2030 and the continued development of the footprint tool. So that is me. Any questions?
Anybody got any questions for Kat? Yes. Let's steal a different microphone for this.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. I think the number was 62% of brands had signed up. I was just wondering what's going on with the other 40%. Are they companies you've reached out to and haven't got back to you, or the reasons that they might not want to join?
So it's 62%. So the brands that signed up cover 62%. The brands that sign up, their products make up 62% of the products placed on the market. So I think what I'd say is we currently work with most of the major high street retailers, kind of big volume brands and retailers. And we're probably missing kind of more of the smaller SME brands or maybe international brands. And I think there's just some kind of, again, barriers to entry for those brands. We are a voluntary agreement, but we run off our signatories, membership fees, and our government funding. So yeah, there's a few kind of barriers to entry. And I think, some of the brands and retailers are further ahead and some of them aren't. So I think, we were having an interesting discussion on my table around policy and governance and kind of what policy, if there are kind of policy drivers around this, it can actually support voluntary action. So I think if we had kind of some of those policy drivers on the horizon in the UK, it might encourage kind of other brands, I guess, to join up. To work collaboratively and almost kind of, Textiles 2030 is there to bring the brands together, get them on the same reporting mechanisms, and also help them collaborate towards those challenges. So, we would encourage all brands to sign up if they can. But yeah, we're also aware there's some barriers for some brands signing up.
Great, thanks.
Anyone else? Hi, I'm just wondering,
You said it's 62% placed on the UK market.
Yeah.
So of that, how much is British manufactured?
I wouldn't be able to tell you, but I would imagine quite a small percentage because we're working with quite a lot of the major high street retailers, and currently their production is global.
I'm just thinking if you flipped that and looked at UK manufacturing, the vast majority of UK manufacturers export abroad because we're a higher level, because that's who can afford our workforce, etc. So, but we have control of carbon emissions, for example, within British manufacturing.
Yeah.
Is that somewhere you want to focus next? How much does it cost, for example?
So I'd say in terms of manufacturing, I'd say our signatory base is mainly brands and retailers, and again there are some of those kind of barriers to entry for manufacturers, but particularly with I guess where we've progressed to in our work, particularly around the circular design toolkit that we've published, we kind of really know now that we need to kind of we need to be working with supply chains, and I was just talking with Lauren from UKFT about how we connect up as well with kind of the Stiffin network, and yeah, how can we kind of test some of these improvements, I guess, within the UK supply chain potentially in the future. So I'd say it's definitely an area we're looking at. How can we work more with manufacturers, and kind of communicate, I guess, these principles and how, So I think, the answer probably is we're, through the current brands and retailers we work with, we are looking at how we can, I guess, impact global manufacturing. But yes, we do want to look at the role UK manufacturing has within that.
I think just based on the economic table, we were discussing this earlier. I just think it would be interesting if if the financial barrier was not excessive. I think there would be a willingness within UK manufacturing to support that fact-finding.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the tool that we use at the moment, the footprint tool, is very set up for brands and retailers to measure their scope 3. But I think there's a real opportunity there on how can the tool support manufacturers as well, which would require some research into how that, how the modules within there and how the data behind the tool works. But it's definitely not an impossible task, and is something that could strengthen the tool and the reporting in the future.
Thank you. Any last questions?
Hi, is there a willingness from brands to share data and work with the supply chain to capture, emissions data, energy data, and share it and put it into these databases?
I think there is, and I think we, through Textiles 2030, brands and retailers submit their data to us. We don't share their individual results, we share an aggregated results, but we have a series of kind of collaborative working groups. One of them is very specifically around the footprint tool and metrics. It's a collaborative process, even where we are kind of looking to, I guess, maybe retailers who have gone further than some of the others to kind of, I guess, support other retailers on how to collect that data, or do they have data that we can start using to kind of assess, is this data good enough, or how do we make this data better? So, I think, we are going into a phase where we are going to have to be looking more into the supply chain and how we collaborate with supply chains and what the other reporting tools are that are out there. So, how do we collaborate with HIG, say, on their FEM module, or is it that ZDHC has kind of that impact data from the supply chain? So, how can we extract that data, I guess, in a kind of robust and verifiable way to help make the footprint tool, I guess, less global and slightly more granular?
Got time for one final question from Kat to Kat.
Hi, thank you. I just want to ask you, it's very impressive everything that you show. We were talking on our table about independent brands and small designers when they start. If they wanted to take part, you say you perhaps haven't captured them as yet so effectively. What do you offer when they do maybe sign up? What practical things are you?
So what we offer is, I guess, what brands and retailers get when they sign up is they have to commit to kind of submitting their data to us on an annual process, but that also means they get access to the footprint tool. So they will get their data reports every year, and they will also be able to use kind of the scenario modeling function within the tool. But then they also kind of get to be included in our kind of collaborative working sessions, so around kind of how we're going to create that systematic change, essentially, so around that circular design, circular business models, closing the loop and metrics, and we also have a policy group. So I guess one element is really around the measurement, understanding your footprints, and kind of understanding the hotspots and where you as a brand need to take action specifically. And then the other element is that kind of collaborative kind of agreement and kind of that network that you're building with the other brands and retailers, and the reuse and recycling sector, and the academia and the trade associations. So we're kind of bringing the whole value chain together.
Great, thank you very much, Kat.